The intercepted signal deep in space, far from any star or planet. The massive Zephyrian monitoring station drifted silently through the darkness. Its metal walls were thick enough to stop a meteor, and its sensors could detect a whisper from halfway across the galaxy. For 300 years, this station had watched the outer edges of known space, making sure nothing dangerous came near the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Lieutenant HFY was having a boring night shift when everything changed. He sat in his chair, half asleep, watching the same empty readings he had seen for months. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, and he was thinking about his bed back home when the main computer started making loud beeping sounds. "What now?" he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. The screen in front of him was flashing red, which meant something important was happening. He sat up straight and looked at the data flowing across his monitor. The numbers made no sense. The computer was picking up signals from the outer rim, but these were not normal signals. They contained mathematical formulas that should not exist. The equations described ways to bend space and time that were far beyond anything the Empire could do. HFY felt his heart start beating faster. He pressed buttons on his control panel, trying to figure out where these signals were coming from. The answer made him even more confused. According to the computer, the signals were coming from a region of space that belonged to a species called humans. Humans? He said out loud. He had heard of them before. They were supposed to be simple farmers who lived on one small planet. The Empire had sent scouts to look at them 200 years ago, and the report said they were not important. They grew food, built basic houses, and fought small wars with primitive weapons. Nothing to worry about. But these signals were definitely not primitive. They talked about technologies that even the smartest Zephyrian scientists did not understand. There were references to something called quantum fold drives and dimensional manipulation matrices. The humans were discussing things that sounded like science fiction. HFY knew he had to tell someone important about this. He reached for his communication device and called his boss, Commander Yuldane. The commander lived in the officer quarters and did not like being woken up. But this was too big to wait until morning. "This better be good." "Lieutenant," Commander Yuldane said when his face appeared on the screen. His hair was messy from sleep and he looked angry. "Sir, we are receiving signals from the human territories," HFY said quickly. "But these are not normal human signals. They contain advanced scientific information that should be impossible for them to know." The commander's expression changed from angry to interested. "Show me," he said. HFY sent the data to the commander's personal screen. For several minutes, both men stared at the information in silence. The signals contained blueprints for machines that could travel faster than light, weapons that could destroy entire moons, and defense systems that could bend reality itself. "This cannot be right," Commander Yuldane said slowly. "Our intelligence reports say the humans barely know how to build proper roads. How could they develop technology that is more advanced than ours?" "I do not know, sir," HFY replied. "But the signals are definitely coming from human space. And, sir, there is something else. The computer says these signals are not being hidden. The humans are broadcasting this information openly, like they do not care who hears it." This news made Commander Yuldane even more worried. If the humans had such advanced technology, why were they not trying to keep it secret? Either they were incredibly foolish or they were incredibly confident. Neither option was good for the Empire. "I need to report this to Admiral HFY immediately," the commander said. "Keep monitoring those signals and record everything. I want to know every detail about what the humans are doing." Admiral HFY was the most respected military leader in the Zephyrian Empire. He had conquered 12 different species and brought them under imperial rule. His ships had never lost a battle, and his strategies were taught in military schools across the galaxy. When Commander Yuldane called him about the human signals, the admiral was in his private study reading reports from other parts of the Empire. "Humans?" Admiral HFY said when he heard the news. "The same humans who live in mud houses and fight with metal swords?" "Yes, sir, but the signals suggest they have developed far beyond our previous estimates," Commander Yuldane explained. He sent copies of the intercepted transmissions to the Admiral's personal computer. Admiral HFY spent the next hour reading through the data. With each page, his expression grew more serious. These humans were not the simple farmers the Empire had dismissed. They had somehow developed technologies that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about physics and engineering. The Admiral called an emergency meeting with his top commanders. Within hours, the most important military leaders in the Empire were gathered. In the main conference room on the flagship Eternal. Glory, the room was filled with battle-hardened officers who had spent their lives conquering other worlds. Gentlemen, Admiral Kethvar began, we have a situation. The humans who we thought were harmless primitives appear to have developed advanced technology. Very advanced. He showed them the intercepted signals on the main screen. The officers murmured among themselves as they read the technical specifications for devices they could barely understand. Some of the equations described ways to manipulate gravity itself. Others outlined defensive systems that seemed to work by changing the laws of physics. Sir, could this be some kind of trick? Asked Commander Zelkor, who was in charge of intelligence gathering. Maybe the humans found this technology somewhere and are pretending they built it themselves. That was my first thought, Admiral Kethvar replied. But our analysis shows that these signals contain unique human mathematical signatures. This technology was definitely developed by human minds. The room fell silent. Every officer knew what this meant. If the humans had truly advanced this far in just 2 centuries, they represented a serious threat to Imperial security. The Empire's power came from having the best technology in the galaxy. If another species had better technology, the Empire's dominance was in danger. What are your orders, sir? Asked Commander Felvan, who controlled the Empire's largest battle fleet. Admiral Kethvar stood up and walked to the large window that looked out into space. His fleet of warships stretched as far as the eye could see, each one capable of destroying entire cities. For his whole career, this sight had filled him with confidence. Today, for the first time, he felt uncertain. We will take the 7th Imperial Fleet to human space, he announced. We need to see these developments for ourselves and determine the true extent of their capabilities. And if they prove to be a threat, sir? Commander Zelkor asked. The Admiral turned back to his officers, his face hard and determined. Then we will remind them why the Zephyrian Empire has ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. No species, no matter how advanced, can be allowed to challenge Imperial authority. But even as he said these words, Admiral Kethvar felt a small doubt in the back of his mind. The human signals had contained something troubling beyond just advanced technology. They had contained confidence. The humans were broadcasting their capabilities openly, because they were not afraid of who might be listening. That night, as the 7th Imperial Fleet prepared to travel to human space, Admiral Kethvar stood alone on his bridge staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were waiting. He wondered if they knew the Empire was coming. He wondered if they cared. First contact goes wrong. 3 days later, the 7th Imperial Fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, expecting to see the rough, primitive settlements that Imperial scouts had described centuries ago. Instead, what he saw through the main viewing screen made him stop breathing for a moment. The human colony of New Geneva was not a collection of mud houses and simple farms. It was a gleaming jewel of advanced civilization. Massive space stations orbited the planet like metal moons, their surfaces covered in lights and docking bays. Ships moved between them in organized patterns that spoke of careful traffic control and sophisticated navigation systems. Sir, said Lieutenant Commander Hexnall from his position at the sensor station, I am reading multiple orbital defense platforms around the planet. Their design is unlike anything in our databases. Admiral Kethvar moved to look at the sensor readings himself. The defensive structures were elegant and streamlined, nothing like the bulky weapon platforms the Empire used. They seemed to float in space without any visible support systems, as if they were held in place by invisible forces. How many people live down there? The Admiral asked. Sir, based on the energy signatures and infrastructure, I estimate approximately 50 million humans on the planet's surface, with another 10 million living in the orbital facilities, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall reported. 50 million. That was more people than lived on most Imperial core worlds. The Admiral had expected to find a few thousand farmers, not a thriving civilization that could rival the Empire's greatest cities. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the humans, announced Communications Officer Pralji. Put it on the main screen, Admiral Kethvar ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human face. The creature was smaller than a Zephyrian, with strange hair covering the top of its head and unusual skin coloring, but its eyes were intelligent and alert, and when it spoke, its voice was calm and confident. Greetings, Zephyrian Fleet. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Republic diplomatic vessel, Defiant Grace. Welcome to New Geneva. We have been expecting you. Expecting them? Admiral Kethvar felt his stomach tighten. How could the humans have known the Imperial fleet was coming? I am Admiral Kethvar of the 7th Imperial Fleet, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You will prepare for immediate inspection and integration into the Zephyrian Empire. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Captain Chen smiled, which confused the Admiral. Most species became terrified when they heard those words, but the human looked almost amused. That sounds like a lot of paperwork, she said casually. Why don't you come aboard my ship instead? We can discuss terms over coffee. I just made a fresh pot. Coffee? The Admiral had never heard of such a thing. More importantly, the human was treating this first contact like a social visit instead of a military surrender. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. You do not understand, Admiral Kethvar said, his voice becoming harder. The Zephyrian Empire does not negotiate with primitive species. You will submit to Imperial authority or face the consequences. Primitive? Captain Chen raised one eyebrow. Oh, that old report. Yes, we knew your scouts visited us a while back. Lovely fellows, though they seemed a bit confused about our development level. We were going through a bit of a retro phase at the time. A retro phase? What did that mean? The Admiral decided he had wasted enough time on conversation. It was time to show these humans the power of the Empire. Lieutenant Commander Hexnall, target that large asteroid near their outer orbital platform. Full power demonstration shot? Yes, sir, came the reply. The flagship's main weapon charged up with a deep humming sound that every member of the crew knew well. This was the sound of Imperial justice preparing to strike. The weapon could destroy a small moon, and it had never failed to convince other species to surrender immediately. A beam of pure energy lanced out from the Imperial ship, striking the asteroid dead center. The space rock vaporized instantly, turning into a cloud of glowing particles that drifted away into space. It was a perfect display of overwhelming firepower. The Admiral waited for Captain Chen to show fear, to beg for mercy, to offer immediate surrender. Instead, she nodded appreciatively. Nice shot, she said, sounding genuinely impressed. Very clean energy dispersal pattern. Your targeting systems must be quite sophisticated. We appreciate the demonstration, appreciate. The Admiral stared at the screen in confusion. The human was complimenting their weapons instead of being terrified by them. I have just demonstrated the power to destroy your entire colony, he said slowly. Do you not understand what this means? Oh, we understand perfectly, Captain Chen replied, still smiling. You have impressive firepower. Very traditional approach. We respect that kind of straightforward thinking. Traditional? The Admiral felt like he was having a conversation with someone who spoke his language, but lived in a completely different reality. Why was this human not afraid? Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall said quietly, I am detecting some unusual readings from the human ships. Their energy signatures are unlike anything I have seen before. Admiral Kethvar looked at his sensor displays. The human vessels were small compared to Imperial warships, but they were generating energy patterns that made no sense. It was as if they were drawing power from empty space itself. Captain Chen, he said, what kind of propulsion systems do your ships use? Oh, we have moved beyond chemical and nuclear propulsion, she replied casually. We use what we call probability drives. They work by convincing the universe that we are already where we want to be. Probability drives? That was impossible. You could not convince the universe of anything. The universe simply was. That is not scientifically possible, the Admiral said. Captain Chen shrugged. We thought so too for a while. Then we figured out that the universe is much more flexible than most people realize. It turns out that reality is more like a suggestion than a law. The Admiral felt a headache starting behind his eyes. Nothing the human said made sense, but she spoke with such confidence that he was beginning to doubt his own understanding of physics. Sir, Communications Officer Pralji announced, we are receiving multiple signals from other human ships throughout the system. They are all sending the same message. What message? Admiral Kethvar asked. Welcome to New Geneva. Please enjoy your visit. Coffee and pastries available at all orbital stations. Coffee and pastries. The Admiral commanded the most powerful military force in known space, and the humans were offering him baked goods. On the screen, Captain Chen was looking at something off to the side. Admiral, My tactical officer is telling me that your ships look a bit cramped. Are your crews comfortable? We have some excellent recreational facilities if anyone needs to stretch their legs. Our crews are fine, the Admiral replied through gritted teeth. We are a military fleet, not tourists. Of course, Captain Chen said. But even military personnel need rest and relaxation. We have some lovely parks on the orbital platforms. Very peaceful, good for stress relief. Stress relief. The Admiral realized that this conversation was causing him more stress than any battle he had ever fought. At least in battle, his enemies acted like enemies. These humans acted like they were greeting old friends. Captain Chen, he said finally, I do not think you understand the situation you are in. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered dozens of species. We have weapons that can crack planets. We have never been defeated. How interesting, Captain Chen replied. We have never been conquered. I suppose that makes us even. Never been conquered? But that was impossible. Every species eventually met a more powerful enemy. That was how the universe worked. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexenall said urgently, I am detecting energy buildups on the human orbital platforms. They appear to be powering some kind of defensive systems. Finally, the Admiral thought, now they would see what human weapons looked like. Now he would understand what he was really dealing with. But as the human defenses came online, the sensor readings became even more confusing. The platforms were not generating normal energy signatures. They were creating what looked like holes in space itself. Captain Chen, Admiral Kethavar said, What are those platforms doing? The human captain looked at her own displays. Oh, those are just our reality stabilizers. We like to keep local space-time nice and stable when we have visitors. Otherwise things can get a bit wobbly. Reality stabilizers. The Admiral decided he needed that coffee. The display of power Admiral Kethavar had reached the end of his patience. For over an hour, he had tried to make the humans understand their situation through normal diplomatic channels. They responded to his threats with offers of coffee and pastries. They treated his demonstrations of force like entertaining light shows. It was time to show them what real power looked like. Captain Chen, he said, his voice cold and final, I am going to target one of your orbital stations. You have 30 seconds to order a complete surrender, or I will demonstrate why no species has ever successfully resisted the Zephyrian Empire. On the screen, Captain Chen looked thoughtful rather than afraid. She turned to speak with someone off camera for a moment, then looked back at the Admiral. Which station were you thinking of hitting? She asked casually. The smaller platform on your outer defense ring, Admiral Kethavar replied, pointing to his tactical display. The one with the unusual energy signature. Oh, that one, Captain Chen nodded. Good choice. It has the best view of the nebula. Could you give us about 5 minutes before you fire? We need to evacuate the gift shop. Gift shop? The Admiral stared at her. You have a gift shop on a military defense platform? Well, it is more of a cultural center, really, Captain Chen explained. We sell local artwork, handmade crafts, some lovely books about our history. The pottery section is particularly popular. Mrs. Henderson from Deck 7 makes the most beautiful vases. The Admiral felt that headache getting worse. You are about to be destroyed and you are worried about pottery? Mrs. Henderson has been working on those vases for 3 months, Captain Chen replied seriously. It would be a shame to lose them. Besides, some of our visitors might want souvenirs. Fine, Admiral Kethavar said. 5 minutes. Then you will see what happens to species who refuse to submit to imperial authority. The next 5 minutes felt like the longest of the Admiral's life. He watched on his sensors as small human shuttles moved back and forth between the orbital platform and other stations. They were actually evacuating their gift shop. Even more bizarrely, other human ships were positioning themselves to get better views, as if they were preparing to watch a fireworks display. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexenall reported, the humans have cleared their personnel from the target platform. But sir, I am reading some very strange energy patterns building up around our target. What kind of patterns? The Admiral asked. I'm not sure, sir. It looks like they are creating some kind of field around the station. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. On the main screen, Captain Chen reappeared. All clear, Admiral. Mrs. Henderson's pottery is safe. You may fire when ready. Admiral Kethavar took a deep breath. This was it. Once the humans saw their precious station destroyed, they would understand the reality of their situation. No species could maintain their cheerful confidence after watching their own infrastructure get vaporized. All weapons, Target the human orbital platform, he commanded. This is not a demonstration shot. Full destruction protocol. I want nothing left but space dust, yes. Sir, came the responses from his weapons officers. The flagship's main weapon charged to full power, joined by the secondary batteries of 6 other Imperial warships. This was enough firepower to destroy a small city. The energy buildup made the entire bridge vibrate with barely contained destructive force. Fire, Admiral Kethvar ordered. 7 beams of pure energy lanced across space toward the human platform. This was the Empire's planet killer attack, the same weapon that had ended the resistance of 11 different species. Nothing could survive this level of concentrated firepower. The beams struck the orbital station dead center. For a moment, there was a brilliant flash of light that temporarily blinded the visual sensors. When the light faded, Admiral Kethvar expected to see empty space where the station had been. Instead, he saw something that made him question his own sanity. The orbital platform was still there, completely undamaged. But that was not the strangest part. The energy from the Imperial weapons had not been absorbed or deflected. Instead, it had been transformed into something else entirely. Floating in space around the station, written in letters of pure light, were the words "Welcome to New Geneva" in 17 different galactic languages, including perfect Zephyrian script. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall said in a voice that sounded strangled, our weapons fire has been converted into a greeting message. The Admiral stared at the display in complete silence. His most powerful weapons, the tools that had conquered half the galaxy, had been turned into a welcome sign. It was impossible. It violated every law of physics he knew. On the main screen, Captain Chen clapped her hands together in delight. Oh, that is lovely. The color gradient on the Zephyrian script is particularly nice. Our probability cascade deflector worked better than we expected. Probability cascade deflector? The Admiral managed to say. It is a simple concept, Captain Chen explained as if she were discussing the weather. When energy hits the deflector, it analyzes all the possible things that energy could become. Then it just selects the most interesting possibility and makes that happen instead. That is impossible, Admiral Kethvar said. Energy cannot just decide to become something else. Well, not on its own, Captain Chen agreed. That is where the probability cascade comes in. It gives the energy some suggestions about what it might like to be instead of a destructive weapon beam. Most energy prefers to be something creative rather than destructive, once you give it the option. The Admiral looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at their instruments with expressions of complete bewilderment. Some of them were quietly running diagnostic checks on their equipment, hoping to find some technical malfunction that could explain what they had just seen. Sir, Communications Officer Pralji said weakly, we are receiving congratulatory messages from human ships throughout the system. They are thanking us for the beautiful light display. Beautiful light display. The Admiral had just fired enough energy to destroy a moon, and the humans were thanking him for entertainment. Captain Chen, he said slowly, what are you people? The human woman smiled, and for the first time, the Admiral noticed something in her eyes that had not been there before. It was not arrogance or cruelty. It was something much more unsettling. It was pity. We are human beings, Admiral, she said gently. We used to be a lot like you, actually. Angry, competitive, always trying to prove we were stronger than everyone else. But we grew out of that phase. Grew out of it? It happened gradually, Captain Chen continued. First, we learned how to manipulate matter and energy. Then we figured out how to work with space and time. Eventually, we discovered that the universe is much more cooperative than most species realize. Once you stop trying to fight reality and start working with it instead, amazing things become possible. The Admiral felt like he was drowning in concepts he could not understand. You are saying you can control reality itself? Control is the wrong word, Captain Chen corrected. We learn to ask nicely instead of demanding. The universe responds much better to polite requests than to brute force. On his sensor displays, Admiral Kethvar could see the welcome message still glowing in space around the human station. His weapons had been more than neutralized. They had been turned into art. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall said urgently, I am detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. All of their ships are powering up simultaneously. The Admiral felt his heart rate increase. Were the humans finally preparing to attack? After all this strange conversation, were they about to show their true military capabilities? Captain Chen, he said, are you preparing to fire on my fleet? The human captain looked genuinely surprised by the question. Fire on you? Oh goodness, no. We are just getting ready to show you something interesting. You seemed frustrated by our defensive system, so we thought we might demonstrate some of our other capabilities. What kind of capabilities? The Admiral asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Captain Chen's smile became wider, and there was something in it that made Admiral Kethvar realize his day was about to become much more complicated. Well, she said, since you came all this way to see us, we thought we should properly introduce ourselves. After all, first impressions are important. Humanity's response Captain Chen raised her hand and made a casual gesture toward empty space. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Admiral Kethvar noticed something that made his blood freeze in his veins. His sensors were picking up new contacts, lots of them. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall said in a voice that cracked slightly, I am reading massive objects decloaking around our entire fleet formation. The main viewing screen automatically switched to tactical display, and Admiral Kethvar saw something that should have been impossible. Human warships were appearing out of nowhere, materializing in perfect formation around every single Imperial vessel. Not just a few ships, but hundreds of them. Where did they come from? He demanded. Sir, they were not there 30 seconds ago, Lieutenant Commander Hexenall replied, frantically checking his instruments. According to our sensors, they just appeared, as if they stepped out of empty space. On the communication screen, Captain Chen looked pleased with her crew's performance. I hope you do not mind the dramatic entrance. Our tactical team has been practicing dimensional fold space maneuvers, and they wanted to show off a bit. Dimensional fold space. The Admiral had heard rumors of such technology from the intercepted signals, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. The human fleet had somehow hidden hundreds of warships in a place that did not exist, then brought them into normal space in perfect attack formation. But as Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical display more carefully, he realized something even stranger was happening. The human ships were not pointing their weapons at the Imperial fleet. Instead, they seemed to be doing something completely different. Sir, Communications Officer Pralji announced, we are receiving audio transmissions from the human vessels. What kind of transmissions? The Admiral asked. Music, sir. Classical orchestral music. All of the human ships are broadcasting the same symphony in perfect synchronization. Music. The Admiral looked at his tactical display again. The human warships had positioned themselves in a complex three-dimensional pattern around the Imperial fleet, and now they were playing music. As he watched, holographic images began appearing in the space between the ships. The holograms were not battle plans or weapons targeting data. They were art galleries. Floating in the vacuum of space, the humans were projecting massive three-dimensional paintings, sculptures, and other artistic creations. The images rotated slowly, allowing viewers from any angle to appreciate the artwork. Some of the pieces were abstract patterns of light and color, while others depicted landscapes from worlds the Admiral had never seen. Captain Chen, he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. What is your fleet doing? Well, she replied cheerfully. We realize that this is probably the first time Zephyrians have encountered our culture, so we thought we should share some of our finest achievements. That painting to your starboard side is from our Neo-Renaissance period. The sculpture formation near your rear guard represents humanity's first attempts at four-dimensional art. Four-dimensional art. The Admiral was not even sure what that meant, but the holographic sculpture seemed to exist in more directions than should be possible. Looking at it made his eyes hurt and his brain feel twisted. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexnall whispered, I am running full sensor scans on the human fleet. The results are unusual. Unusual how? Admiral Kethvar asked. Sir, according to our instruments, the human ships are not made of normal matter. The hulls appear to be constructed from crystallized probability waves, held together by controlled quantum uncertainty. Their weapon systems are based on something our computer calls directed empathy beams. Crystallized probability waves? Directed empathy beams? The Admiral felt like he needed to sit down, but he was already sitting. Captain Chen, he said, what exactly are directed empathy beams? The human captain looked thoughtful. Oh, those are weapons that make the target feel sorry for being aggressive. They work by helping hostile forces understand their own motivations and find better ways to express their feelings. Very effective for conflict resolution. You have weapons that make people feel emotions? The Admiral asked. Well, technically, they just help people recognize emotions they already have, Captain Chen clarified. Most aggressive behavior comes from fear or misunderstanding. The empathy beams help clear that up so everyone can have a proper conversation. The Admiral looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at their displays with expressions of complete confusion. Some of them were quietly talking to each other, trying to figure out what was happening. He could hear fragments of their conversations. The math does not work. These energy readings are impossible. Sir, the computer keeps saying insufficient data for analysis. On the main screen, Captain Chen seemed to notice the Imperial crew's distress. Her expression became more sympathetic. Admiral Kethvar, she said gently, I can see that this is all very confusing for you and your people. Would you like to come aboard our ship? It might be easier to explain things face to face. Come aboard your ship? The Admiral repeated. Why would I do that? Well, for one thing, we have much better coffee than you probably get on military rations, Captain Chen replied. But more importantly, I think you need to understand what humanity has become. It is not something that translates well over communication channels. The Admiral looked at his tactical display. His fleet was completely surrounded by human vessels that used impossible technology and treated warfare like an art exhibition. His most powerful weapons had been turned into greeting cards. His officers were on the verge of nervous breakdowns trying to understand sensor readings that violated the laws of physics. If I come aboard your ship, he said slowly, what guarantee do I have that I will be safe? Captain Chen looked genuinely surprised by the question. Safe? Admiral, we have not hurt anyone in over 200 years. Violence is, well, it is not really something we do anymore. Not something you do anymore. We found better ways to solve problems, she explained. Violence is usually just a failure of imagination. Once you learn to think creatively about conflicts, there are always more interesting solutions than just hitting things. The Admiral studied the human ships on his display. Each one was broadcasting art, music, or what appeared to be educational programs about human culture. Even their military fleet was functioning as a traveling cultural exhibition. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hexenall said quietly, I recommend accepting their invitation. Our sensors cannot provide useful intelligence about their technology. We need direct observation to understand what we are dealing with. Admiral Kethvar nodded slowly. His tactical training told him never to board an enemy vessel, but his strategic training told him to gather intelligence whenever possible. Besides, these humans did not act like any enemy he had ever encountered. Very well, Captain Chen, he said. I will visit your ship, but I warn you if this is some kind of trap. Admiral, Captain Chen interrupted gently. We are past the age of traps. We will send a shuttle to collect you. Please bring anyone you think might be helpful for our discussions. We have plenty of room. As the communication ended, Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge one more time. His officers were still struggling with their impossible sensor readings. The human art exhibition was still playing in the space around his fleet. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the faint sound of that symphonic music the human ships were broadcasting. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethvar had no idea what was going to happen next. The humans had taken every rule of warfare, every principle of military strategy, and turned them all upside down. He had come here to conquer a primitive species. Instead, he was about to have coffee with beings who treated reality itself as a suggestion. Commander Zelkor, he said to his intelligence officer, you will accompany me to the human vessel. And Commander Felvan, you as well. If we are going to understand these people, we need our best minds working on it. As he walked toward the shuttle bay, Admiral Kethvar wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his career, or if he was about to learn something that would change everything. The new paradigm. The human shuttle was unlike anything Admiral Kethvar had ever seen. Instead of the military gray metal that covered Imperial vessels, the walls seemed to be made of some kind of flowing, crystalline material that shifted colors as they moved through space. The seats were more comfortable than his own command chair, and soft music played from sources he could not identify. Admiral, said the human pilot, a young woman with bright eyes and an easy smile. Welcome aboard the Peaceful Intentions. Captain Chen is waiting for you in the observation lounge. Can I get you anything for the trip? We have 17 different kinds of tea, coffee from 12 worlds, and some lovely pastries that our chef made this morning. Just take us to your captain, Admiral Kethvar replied, still trying to process the fact that a military shuttle had a chef who made pastries. The journey to the human flagship took only a few minutes, but those minutes were filled with wonders that made the Admiral question everything he thought he knew about space travel. Through the transparent walls of the shuttle, he could see that they were not moving through normal space. Instead, they seemed to be traveling through a tunnel of shifting colors and impossible geometries. "We are using a probability corridor," the pilot explained when she noticed his confusion. "It is faster than normal propulsion, and the scenery is much more interesting." When they arrived at the human flagship, Admiral Kethvar was surprised by its size. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times larger than his own flagship, but it somehow managed to look elegant rather than intimidating. The hull was covered in what appeared to be gardens with actual trees and flowers growing in the vacuum of space. "How do plants survive in space?" Commander Zelkor asked. "Oh, we taught them how," the pilot replied casually. "Plants are very adaptable once you explain the situation to them properly." The Admiral decided to stop asking questions until he had a chance to talk to Captain Chen. Each answer he received only led to more impossible things. The interior of the human ship was even more surprising than the outside. Instead of narrow military corridors, the Defiant Grace had wide open spaces filled with natural light and the sound of running water. There were actual parks inside the ship, with paths that wound between trees and flower gardens. People moved through these spaces with the relaxed pace of civilians on holiday, rather than the crisp efficiency of military personnel. "Admiral Kethvar," Captain Chen called out as they entered what she had called the observation lounge. "So glad you could make it. Please have a seat." The observation lounge was a circular room with transparent walls that provided a complete view of space in all directions. Comfortable chairs were arranged around a table where several humans were already seated. Along with what appeared to be representatives from other species the Admiral did not recognize. "I would like you to meet some of our friends," Captain Chen said as she poured coffee from an elegant silver pot. "This is Ambassador Veltar from the Crystalline Collective, Minister Hume from the Quantum Philosophers, and General Zixandra from the Reformed Warrior Clans." The Admiral stared at the assembled beings. "You have allies from species we have never heard of?" "Oh, you have heard of them," Captain Chen replied, handing him a cup of coffee that smelled better than anything he had ever experienced. "You just know them by different names. The Crystalline Collective used to be called the Silicon Supremacy before they discovered meditation. The Quantum Philosophers were the Probability Pirates until they found better ways to explore uncertainty. And the Reformed Warrior Clans used to be the Blood Reapers." "The Blood Reapers?" Commander Felvan said in shock. "But they were the most violent species in known space. They destroyed entire solar systems for sport." General Zixandra, who looked like a cross between a giant spider and an armored dinosaur, made a sound that might have been laughter. "We did indeed," she said in a voice like grinding metal, "until the humans showed us that there were more interesting ways to test our strength. Now we compete in poetry contests and philosophical debates, much more challenging than simple destruction." Admiral Kethvar took a sip of his coffee and felt his eyes widen in surprise. It was not just good coffee. It was perfect coffee, better than he had imagined coffee could be. The taste seemed to clear his mind and calm his nerves at the same time. "How do you make coffee this good?" he asked. "We ask the coffee beans very politely to be their best selves," Captain Chen replied with a straight face. "Most ingredients are happy to cooperate once they understand they are part of something special." The Admiral decided that question was too dangerous to pursue further. "Captain Chen," he said, "I need to understand what is happening here. My empire has ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. We have never encountered resistance like this." "Resistance?" Captain Chen looked puzzled. "Admiral, we are not resisting you. We are trying to help you." "Help us do what?" "Grow up," she said simply. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the table, the other beings nodded in agreement. Even his own officers looked thoughtful, as if the idea was not entirely unwelcome. "Every species goes through the same stages," Ambassador Veltar explained, her crystalline voice ringing like wind chimes. "First, they develop technology. Then they use that technology to dominate others. Eventually, they realize that domination is less satisfying than cooperation. The humans reached that realization faster than most," Minister Hume added, his quantum-shifted features flickering between different possible appearances. They had the wisdom to ask for help when they were ready to change. Ask for help from whom? Admiral Keithvar demanded. Captain Chen smiled and gestured toward the transparent walls of the observation lounge. Look around you, Admiral. The universe is full of species who have moved beyond conquest and war. We are all connected in what we call the cooperative network. Cooperative network? It is not a government or an empire, she explained. It is more like a friendship club for mature civilizations. We share knowledge, art, and resources. We help younger species when they are ready to join us, and we protect each other from threats. Threats like us? Commander Zelkor asked. Not threats like you, General Zixandra corrected. You are not a threat. You are children playing with dangerous toys. The real threats are the species that refuse to grow, that choose to remain violent even after they have been shown better ways. Admiral Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. What happens to species that refuse to change? The room became quiet. The humans and their allies exchanged glances that suggested they were having some kind of silent conversation. They become extinct, Captain Chen said sadly. Not because we destroy them, but because they destroy themselves. Violence and conquest are not sustainable in the long term. Species that refuse to evolve eventually consume everything around them, including their own futures. The Admiral looked around the table at the faces of beings from species that had once been conquerors, destroyers, and tyrants. Now they were philosophers, artists, and cooperative partners in something larger than any empire. You are saying that the Zephyrian Empire is doomed. Unless we change our ways, he said. We are saying that the Zephyrian Empire has a choice, Captain Chen replied. You can continue trying to conquer the galaxy until you run out of resources and enemies. Or you can join the rest of us in building something better. And if we choose to continue our current path, Captain Chen's expression became sad, then we will be very sorry to lose you. But we will not allow you to harm the species under our protection. For the first time since arriving at New Geneva, Admiral Kethvar understood the true nature of humanity's power. They were not just more advanced than the Empire. They were part of something vast and cooperative that included dozens of species the Empire had never even known existed. How long have you been watching us? He asked. Since your first interstellar voyage, Ambassador Veltar replied. We always monitor young species as they develop. Some, like the humans, reach out for help when they are ready to change. Others, like the Zephyrians, need more time. We have been waiting for you to be ready, Captain Chen added. Every species reaches that moment of choice eventually. The moment when they realize that there has to be something better than endless conflict. Admiral Kethvar thought about his long career, his many victories, his pride in the Empire's dominance. Then he thought about the impossibly advanced technology he had seen today. The casual way the humans had neutralized his most powerful weapons, the vast network of cooperative species that had been hidden from Imperial knowledge. What would joining your cooperative network mean for the Empire? He asked. It would mean learning new ways to solve problems, Captain Chen replied. It would mean contributing your unique perspectives and abilities to projects that benefit everyone. It would mean discovering that the universe is much more interesting when you are building things instead of breaking them. The Admiral looked at his officers. Commander Zelkor was leaning forward, clearly intrigued by the possibility. Commander Felvan looked thoughtful, as if he was already imagining how Imperial military efficiency might be applied to peaceful projects. This would require approval from the Imperial Senate and the Emperor himself. Admiral Kethvar said slowly,